So you remember how last week I said that we had to be on the lookout for the National Defense Authorization Act that was being brought to the Senate floor on this week. And so they presented a few amendments, right? And so for whoever doesn't know what the National Defense Authorization Act or the N.D.A.A. 2021, so okay. So this bill authorizes fiscal year 2021 appropriations and sets forth policies for Department of Defense programs and activities, including military personnel strengths. It does not provide budget authority, which is provided in subsequent appropriations legislations. But essentially, so it appropriates the funds for the DoD, for the active duty and reserve forces, for maritime matters, and also for the Department of Energy national security programs, and the Defense Nuclear Facility Safety Board, right?
Department of Energy is basically nuclear weapons.
Right, exactly. And one of the things that is coming up is for the Space Force. So it's going to be interesting to see how much money is poured into this Space Force.
That's true. Absolutely, yeah.
So then Rand Paul actually introduced an amendment, which I thought was really great. So it says, today, U.S. Senator, and this was on the 1st of July, Rand Paul introduced a bipartisan amendment to S. 4049, the N.D.A.A., to end America's longest war and provide bonuses to those who have deployed in support of the global war on terrorism, empowering America to redirect the savings from ending nation building in Afghanistan to the country's needs at home. So the amendment, which is a bipartisan majority eventually voted to table, was based on this Joint Resolution 12, the American Forces Going Home for Noble Service Act, which he introduced with Senator Tom Udall in March of 2019, and it's called the Afghan Service Act. So here is the joint resolution or the amendment. It's only 5 pages long. It's not really long. But I thought that this was really well, the first part of it is okay, but so it's to obviously bring down the end to this war in Afghanistan, right? Where I think it's in about a year we would be out of Afghanistan altogether. And it's also to, okay, so it would repeal the authorization for use of military force, which that I also thought was really important. And so I think that, you know, Rand Paul is doing some really great work right now, thankfully. Obviously, he is not perfect. He has his own issues, you know, that I don't agree with, but at the same time, I think that this is really important and needs to be highlighted. So the senators voted 60 to 33 to table Paul's amendment to the N.D.A.A, effectively pigeonholing it. So the proposal, which was also sponsored by Senator Udall, would remove troops from Afghanistan within a year and give them a $2,500 bonus. And like I said, it would also repeal the 2001 authorization for the use of military force once U.S. troops have left the country. So here's hoping that actually,
Fantastic.
Obviously, it's been pigeonholed. His legislation has been pigeonholed, but
didn't Trump? I mean, am I wrong that there were other amendments basically require? I know that Trump had threatened to veto the N.D.A.A. because there was something in there about keeping troops in Afghanistan in one of the amendments.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's a conflict between the warmongers and the you know, Rand Paul's obviously taking on that military complex, right?
Mm-hmm. But you see how the majority of the senators voted to table it, so it won't even get to be, you know, any sort of roll call or anything.
Right. Although it, 60 to 33 is not a, it's okay. It's 2-1, but it's still, to me, there's 30. He got 33 to vote in favor of this, right, or at least not to table it. So that says something that if he had 17 more,
right, which that's what I'm hoping is that other people will introduce some sort of amendments, that go along this line. He was just one that introduced.
So
this.
Kamala Harris voted against it, by the way.
of course.
See, there you go.
How about Bernie Sanders? I assume he voted.
Let me look it up. I'll look it up. Talk amongst yourselves.
Okay.
I mean, I think it's interesting that, if there's a lot of popular pressure, if this becomes an issue, like if people make the equation between, civil rights and justice and the wars, then all of a sudden there might be popular pressure, to sway some senators to vote in favor of something like this. But I don't see it happening yet.
Yeah, and again, this goes back to this whole thing with Russia and paying for the bounty of American soldiers. Like all of this coming out at the same time, all these stories coming out at the same time. It's not, by mistake. It's all by design.
Right. I mean, didn't we pay bounties to the Taliban for killing Russian soldiers back in the late 70s, early 80s, right?
Any luck, Jim?
No, I'm not finding it. I found a specific statement by Kamala Harris. I'm not as adept at you as pulling up the vote.
Well, that's okay.
Amendment.
It's just interesting. I'm just
Yeah.
curious, who those senators were who sided with Rand Paul, but that's fine.